Hello everybody, welcome to an introduction to pivot tables. In today's lesson we're going to create a pivot table and then we're going to use the manipulation of rows, columns, and values to find a specific data point. When we're done with this lesson you'll be able to take a quiz, and if you pass that quiz you'll get a badge. So let's take a look. If you would like to, you can actually download this spreadsheet from the lesson and use it along with, while we do this, this is actually the exact same spreadsheet that you'll be using on your quiz too. So you can do a little bit of practicing before you actually take your quiz. So first things first, pivot tables. The reason for pivot tables is we want to be able to take a spreadsheet that has a lot of data on it and then be able to compile it and total it quickly. And then there are other manipulations that we can do with it as well. But really it's the idea of taking a lot of data and then finding very specific parts of that data and being able to compile it quickly. So first step is to click anywhere within your data. So I just clicked right here. And then in Excel, what you would do is you go up to Insert, Pivot Table, and then I want to start a new worksheet for my pivot table. You could put it onto an existing worksheet, but I want to set up a new worksheet. I'm going to click OK. Once I've done that, what happened is if you look down here at the bottom, this created a brand new tab. So single test score, that was the original tab that we were on. And then when we inserted a new pivot table, it created this other tab that's called Sheet 1 right now. And that's where we're going to put our pivot table. Right now that you can see that it's empty. And if you want to, you can even rename this. I like to name it Pivot, so I know that that's where I put my pivot table. Now over here, you'll see that there are a bunch of field names. So each of these is a different field name. The place where these come from is actually from that initial spreadsheet. So if you look at the top of this spreadsheet and you look at the column headers, you'll see school, grade, ID, last name, first name, gender, ethnicity, SPED, EL, test, score, percentile, and achievement level. Once you've created your pivot table, you'll notice that those are the exact same field names as you had as the column headers. So that's what those represent. Now the first thing we can do is we can just kind of play around a little bit and just see what happens. Down here are areas. So each of these rectangles is considered an area. This area is called the filters. This area is called the columns, the rows, and the values. For this introduction, we're going to ignore the filters. We're really just going to talk about the columns, rows, and values. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag school into the columns and just see what happens. All right, what happened here was as soon as we did that, this opened up our spreadsheet and made a column for each school name, for each unique school name that showed up in this tab. So let's take a look back at this first tab. We're going to look in school and you'll see Rainbow, Harris, Oakland, Liberty, Baker, Harris. These are all the different school names from that column. So once I drug school into columns, it created all these columns, one for each of the schools that shows up in that row. I don't really like how this is showing up because it goes all the way across. Now there's some formatting things we could do with that, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to take school out, and all you have to do is drag it out of there and it disappears. And I'm going to put school into rows instead and see what that looks like. I like that a lot better because now I can see all those school names, they line up nicely. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is, right now it's nice that we have this and we've got a list of all our schools, and if that's all we needed was a list of schools, done. But that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to see how many students met standards on their reading test for the MCA. So first things I'm going to do those, I'm just going to play around a little bit. This would be something that would be that might be helpful for you as well as you introduce yourself to this. I'm going to put SPED into columns and see what happens there. All right, so school is still in rows, so you can see all my different schools. And then the two different options when I put SPED is that a student is either not SPED or is special education. So that's nice. All right, so now I've got more of a table here because I've got rows and I've got columns. Now if I drag SPED out, that disappears and we go back to just having the schools. I could also put ethnicity into columns, and there's all of the ethnicities that show up at my schools. So again, I've got a table here, so that's nice. I've got all the different schools that show up. I have all the different ethnicities that show up at our schools. But where the power with a pivot table is right here, where we can actually see some numbers, so we can summarize what is in each of our schools. So in order to do that, I need to fill this values field. So I'm going to now put ethnicity into the values field as well. You'll notice ethnicity stays in the columns field, but I can drag another ethnicity to the values field, and now it actually populates and tells me all these different numbers. So Harris Hill Elementary School has 10 American Indian students. Rainbow High School has 321 Asian students, and so on. Now if I decide, okay, that's not really what I want to look for, I actually am looking for the achievement level. So in other words, exceeds, meets, partially proficient, or does not meet on the reading test for the MCA. So I'm going to drag ethnicity out. I'm going to drag the values out. So now I'm back to just my schools. Now I'm going to go find achievement level. I'm going to drag that into the columns. So there we have it. Does not meet, exceeds, meets, partially proficient. So I've got all my options up, but I still don't have my values. Again, I have to grab another achievement level, drag that to the values. And now it tells me. So now I can tell you that Fluffy Cloud Middle School had 325 students who met and 182 students who exceeded on this reading test. So that is how you set up your pivot table, and it's also how you find a specific data point. So those are the two things we talked about: creating a pivot table and then using the manipulation of rows, columns, and values to find a specific data point. At this time, go ahead and take the quiz, and hopefully you do really well on it. Good luck.